Alright guys, well welcome to the Earth Nails and Tails garden. I'm just going to give you an overall walkthrough of the garden, what vegetables that we had in the spring, some changes that we've made this season, and then the vegetables that we plan on growing this fall. So right off the bat, we have about 1,000 square feet dedicated vegetable garden space and about 500 square foot of bed space. This year we've transitioned from in-ground beds to mainly raised beds, just to make the garden space more efficient and easier to use. We just make it more formal. You know, this is a at-home garden. This isn't a garden where we're selling our produce, so we just wanted to make a space that's inviting for us, as well as easy to use and can grow a lot of vegetables. So we want to try to grow as many vegetables as we possibly can, enough that we can provide ourselves food for the year, which is the goal. So obviously we're still learning. We have quite a long time to go. I've been gardening for about 5 years now and about 4 years on this property. Before that, I was gardening mostly out of pots on my apartment, or in my apartment on my balcony. So that's really where I got started, and now this is where I'm at 5 years later. So definitely some big changes, a lot of learning in the process. But this is a pretty unique time here for us in Virginia because we're transitioning from our first season, as I said before, to our second season. So we're lucky enough to have 2 seasons here. So just a quick walkthrough. As you can see here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 L-shaped raised beds. Now this is about the 3rd iteration of this garden. We started this garden actually with cinder blocks, which we had 4 raised beds. They were 4x8 made out of cinder blocks, so those are really nice to start out. And I actually created these raised beds last year. So this is the first full year that we're in these beds, and so far I'm very happy with how they turned out. So this was the bulk of our garden. Right before we got started this year, when I was fencing out this garden, we decided to add these side beds here. So these side beds, and same thing over here, our garden is very symmetrical. These side raised beds here were not always here. These raised beds are brand new within the last few weeks. We actually had 3 in-ground beds here. So we had 6 on this side and then 6 on that side. And then after we got rid of our spring vegetables, I replaced these with these raised beds. And I'll kind of talk more later in another video on why I transitioned from in-ground beds to raised beds. But really, in-ground beds or raised beds, they will both get the job done. Just for simplicity's sake, in-ground beds are definitely cheaper to start off, and they can help you amend soil or kind of correct soil before you start into more intensive gardening. So all in all, I have 4, 5, 6, 7 essentially raised beds. And the way that I do this is I split this garden up into 4 different sections, so that way I can do some sort of crop rotation. So I'm not planting the same vegetables in the same spot every single year. But now let's just talk about what we have in the ground right now. So right here, this is our cucumber bed. We have 6 cucumbers, 2 of which are the pickling variety, and this bed has done amazing for us this year. As you can see, it's starting to look a little sad coming toward the end of the season. It has been very dry here, and then recently, since the storm came through, we've been getting a lot of rain, so it's just been back and forth with these cucumbers. But overall this season, we've gotten close to 300 cucumbers from these plants, so I'm very happy with the way that this bed has provided for us this season. In this bed here, we had mostly green beans. So in the front here, we had bush beans, and then in the middle part of the bed, we had half runners, which get a little bit taller, or can get significantly taller than the bush beans. And then in the back part of the bed there, we had lettuce heads, which the lettuce heads did really well. If you want to check out some pictures, I have some on Instagram as well as our website. You can check out those. This back bed here in the spring, it started out with spinach, radishes, carrots. Those all did really well. We got about 7 pounds of spinach at the end of the season. That's when we were having to pull those plants out because they started to bolt because the weather was getting warm. So They did very, very well. We got 20 pounds of carrots, a reasonable amount of radishes. So it's doing really well. And now, after we pulled those out, we had some extra tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant plants, which we planted in there, which is what you see here. And we kind of just let those go to the chickens. Over here, we have our actual nightshade bed. In the beginning of the season, this was full of leaf lettuce, which also did really well. Lettuce just did really well this year in the spring, but now it's our nightshade bed. So we have Roma tomatoes, which you can see here. We have some Roma tomatoes. We have our 2 cherry tomato plants, which are doing well. Do need to get some fertilizer on these guys, but those are just looking great. 2 of those, and then another Roma tomato plant. We did get some damage from the storm, so some of our plants are blown over, but overall they're looking pretty good. We have a couple eggplants back here, and these are Italian variety eggplants, so they're not the huge purple eggplants that you're used to seeing. This is about as big as they'll get, but they are pretty delicious. Then we have some banana peppers here. As you can see, one's blown over. Oh, hello marbles, how are you? One of our chickens. So banana peppers. We have some purple beauties over here. Oh, here's one starting to ripen up. And then we have our hot peppers. So we have 2 jalapeno plants. I picked most of these already, so here's some here. And then we have a serrano pepper plant as well. So this bed is doing well, very well this year, so I'm happy with that. All right, and then the center bed, which we have here, just covered. We were having some pretty bad weed issues on this one, so we decided to cover it to get it ready for the fall. In the spring, we had beets and cauliflower in this bed. And we're probably going to be doing some more cauliflower and beets in this bed this season, and then we'll be doing cucumbers in it next year. So now over to the side beds. So as I said, we did have 6 beds here, 3 on each side. Just renovated these. So right here, which I'm very excited about, we have our sweet potato, which is just going crazy. It's very happy, as you can see. So we did 4 plants there, so we're, it's not too many sweet potatoes, but enough to be happy with. That's my first year planting sweet potatoes. We have an elderberry bush here. We did get some elderberry off of that, and the chickens also love them. You can see here, there's some still forming here. And then we have another bush over there outside. But in the spring, as I said, we had 3 raised beds, or in-ground beds, excuse me. So we had broccoli here. In the spring, the broccoli didn't do too well. We actually got it in the ground, I think a little bit too late, because they wound up bolting before we were able to get any significant size heads. So I'm hoping that in the fall, which is coming soon, I actually just started on our broccoli plants the other day, inside. So hopefully the fall will be nicer to us in these beds here. And then over here, we had, again, in-ground beds, and we had our potatoes here, which the potatoes did pretty well. We got about, I think we planted about 18 plants, and we probably got anywhere between 10 and 20 potatoes for each individual potato slip that we planted. So overall, very good. And we planted Yukon Golds, russet potatoes, and red potatoes. So we got a good variety from that. And then going to the other side, which again is the same. Keep it symmetric, keep it nice. Over here, so you may have seen some pictures on Instagram or our website. We had extremely prolific squash this year. Those plants were beautiful. We just pulled them out because we had some vine borers which got to them, so I am working on a couple fixes for those next year. But I am actually going to be starting another round of squash plants in a couple weeks in these same beds, so we'll see how those will do. But our 3 beds that we had here were all squash. So we had yellow squash, zucchini, as well as spaghetti squash, which we got about 6 spaghetti squash, so that's pretty exciting. And then lastly, on these beds over here, we had collards, kale, and Swiss chard, which all did extremely well. We actually just pulled those out. Brassicas actually work as a really good ground cover, and we like to leave the soil living for as long as we can, so I just pulled them out before I renovated these. So we actually left our collards in from the spring all the way up till now, so it's the first week of August. We just pulled them out at the beginning of this week, so the collard greens can stay in the ground for quite some time, and there's very few weeds because they are very good ground covers. And the kale as well. So the kale will start to get a little bit bitter as the temperature gets warmer, but as the chickens come in here, they love to eat on the kale, so we left that in there as living to keep the soil going, and a nice treat for the chickens. So this is actually a really good starting video. I was actually a little nervous to just like show off a bare garden, but the more I'm thinking about it, I'm just super excited because now you guys get to see how these beds are going to transform over the next few weeks and months, from the summer or spring and summer garden, which we have now, into the fall and winter garden that we'll have in a couple months. So just going around here, as you can see, I have a fence here. We originally had 3 gates, 1, 2, 3, but we weren't really using the side gates, so we wound up putting in the raised beds and then putting chicken wire around everything because the chickens were getting into here. So we actually have something that works really well is if you're having issues with your chickens getting into your stuff, you can hang burlap, which you can see is up here. It kind of got blown around from the storm, but you can use burlap and hang it down, and it'll actually prevent them from jumping in because they don't like moving objects. So that burlap hanging down actually prevented them from jumping up on the gate and into the garden. However, I am going to go for a more permanent solution and probably just get full 6-foot pickets and install those up there so they cannot get in. One thing that I really want to do is probably later on next year, is do a little bit better job of this fence and make this garden even more permanent, make it a really nice, beautiful space. But you know what? If you're just starting out, you don't need all of this. You don't need all of these raised beds. If you want to go for the cheapest, quickest option, in-ground beds is definitely the way to go because you can go with the existing soil, add some amendments, which I'm going to talk about in a later video, and then you can get going that same day, which is excellent, much cheaper. You don't have to spend money on wood for the raised beds, so a lot less thinking involved, and you're able to start growing right off the bat. So I hope you guys like this tour of our garden and inspired you to get out there and start your own garden today. As always, if you like this video, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video on YouTube, and I'll be sure to leave the link to our Instagram page at Earth Nails and Tales and our website, earthnailsandtales.com. Have a good one.